How many of you have seen the TV show MASH? Excellent. It's going to make this easier. So MASH stands for Mobile Army Surgical Hospital, and the TV show is centered around a surgical hospital during the Korean War. Now, this hospital had a chaplain, like many military units then and now. And because the hospital could pick up and move with little notice, the Sunday services happened every week in the mess tent, the same place where everybody ate meals. So in one episode, a soldier came to church in the mess tent hoping to ask Father Mulcahy for help after the service was over. He had left his unit without permission, AWOL, AWOL. In the military, this is a crime. When he was confronted during the service by a military police officer who wanted to take him back to his unit, he asked the chaplain for sanctuary, for refuge and safety in this place of worship. Bless you. The chaplain granted it. Now think about this a little bit. Every Sunday morning, the hospital sets up the mess hall for Sunday service, and then they put all the tables back and it becomes the mess hall again. So typically, after the service, they would be rearranging things for Sunday brunch. And on this particular Sunday, brunch was going to be very special, but we'll get back to that in just a minute. So as you can imagine, the military police officer scoffed at the idea that this tent in the middle of Korea counted as a place where a person could be granted sanctuary. Colonel Potter, the commander of the hospital, who was both a doctor and a colonel, tended to agree. But the chaplain refused to budge. He understood his ultimate call to be a provider of safety or refuge. His faith, his call to ministry, told him he had a responsibility to offer sanctuary to someone who asked. So Colonel Potter agreed to call the military lawyer, the judge advocate, who also said the mess hall didn't count as a church and therefore couldn't be a place of sanctuary. The chaplain refused again, saying he couldn't answer to military law in this situation. He could only answer to a higher law, a larger calling. He told the commander he would only listen to an answer from the head chaplain for all of Korea. Again, he received a negative answer. The head chaplain said because the mess tent wasn't a permanent structure, it couldn't be considered a place of sanctuary. Faced with this answer, what might you do? I wonder if this is the point I would have given in. But that's not what happened. The chaplain refused again. He risked his career and possibly even his own freedom because he understood his call to provide sanctuary, to provide refuge, to be greater than other rules. He understood this in the face of the fact that everyone, even his friends in camp, disagreed with him. Remember I told you it was a very special brunch that day? The soldiers were going to have fresh eggs for brunch. Some of you understand. Until that time, they had only had powdered eggs. Many of them had been there for years with nothing but army food. So this was the first opportunity for something truly fresh like this in quite some time. Imagine eating only sack lunches and not good ones for years. And then you're eagerly anticipating delicious, fresh eggs. And you're told the chaplain is refusing to let the mess hall be reset. This fictional story offers us a few real-life questions to consider. What is sanctuary and where can it happen? What is our call and even our responsibility to offer sanctuary? Who can we offer sanctuary to? And perhaps most importantly, what might we be called to sacrifice in order to do it? So let's start with the first one. What is sanctuary and where can it happen? Church buildings have long been considered places of sanctuary. The idea is this is where we come together. The ancient idea is this is where we come together and ask God to dwell among us. The understanding around it is that this is where we worship God, and that makes the place sacred. The church building, therefore, becomes a place of refuge, a place of safety. We have stories all over our culture that tell us, perhaps naively, that a church is a holy place and a place where nothing evil can cross the door. That because God resides here, we are safe. And even in our U.S. American society, where we highly value the separation of church and state, we find the government reluctant to encroach on this idea and to enter a church to arrest someone, even someone believed to have committed a crime. So how many of you have heard of the sanctuary movement that many UU congregations are participating in across the country? To participate in the sanctuary movement, a church has to have a building in which a person could reasonably and safely live for an extended period of time. When a church decides to take a person into sanctuary, they are counting on that old understanding that a church is a sacred place, a place of refuge, of safety, of sanctuary. Churches participating in the sanctuary movement are deciding to offer this refuge and safety to people who have crossed the U.S. border without documentation. The churches are taking risks when they make this decision and creating an inconvenience for congregants, perhaps not quite akin to the loss of a fresh egg brunch. To offer sanctuary in this way is to invite the attention of the government. Immigration and Customs Enforcement suddenly has a reason to be paying attention to your church and everyone who enters it. And there isn't an actual law that protects churches from law enforcement going inside. It is entirely the protection of public opinion. Although the government can enter a church and remove an immigrant, violating sanctuary is generally frowned upon. Still, while offering safety to others in this way, a church is taking the step is likely to face conflict and disagreement, sometimes from within the congregation, and more often from those outside the congregation and the rest of the community. And yet, what is the higher calling that the church is answering, that they're listening to here? Are the sacrifices they're making worth it? And what does it say about our faith or theirs if they aren't? Moving deeper, is sanctuary about just a building? Do you think the fictional MASH lawyer and the head chaplain were right when they told when they told Father Mulcahy that he couldn't offer sanctuary in a tent? Or was he right in his conviction that sanctuary is about more than a building? Sanctuary isn't something we offer often or easily to one another. To step outside the expectations of our society and even sometimes outside of our laws in order to offer safety and refuge to another being means creating something else, listening to something more than our own sense of self-preservation, and ultimately, it's our higher calling. Elie Wiesel, a Jewish writer and Holocaust survivor, would, I suspect, agree with Father Mulcahy. Sanctuary, he says, is often something very small, not a grandiose gesture, but a small gesture toward alleviating human suffering and preventing humiliation. Sanctuary is a human being. It is a dream. That is why you are here, and that is why I am here. We are here because of one another. We are in truth each other's shelter. So, what if it's not necessarily, or perhaps not always, a place, but rather something we offer each other, a gesture towards alleviating human suffering and preventing humiliation, a human being, a dream? What might that mean? Psychologist Eva Fogelman tells the story of a woman named Hannah who was walking through a marketplace in Jerusalem. Suddenly, this 40-year-old mother of 8 heard someone shouting, "Terrorist! Arab!" A young man ran past her and was tackled by a soldier right at her feet. Adan al-Afandi, age 21, a young Muslim extremist, had stabbed a 13-year-old Jewish boy. The crowd closed in. Hannah felt something terrible was about to happen. Someone fired a shot. Without thinking, she threw herself atop the young Arab to protect him. The crowd was shocked. They spit on her, kicked her, cursed her, and called her Arab lover and traitor, and worse. But she stayed put until the police took him into custody. And in the weeks that followed, her actions were fiercely debated in Israel. She came from a community of Jews called ultra-Orthodox. And she had further violated stereotypes about them and about women among them by agreeing to go on television with the mother of the boy who had been stabbed. On television, the mother screamed, "I am very angry at this woman, more than at the terrorist," and said she would have preferred that the crowd had killed the young man right there in the market. Hannah just replied, "I gave him sanctuary as a human being, as a child of God, and now I must explain myself?" What call was Hannah listening to? When Hannah decided at that moment to step outside of social conventions to protect this man and to go on TV with the mother, she understood something deeper about her faith. She understood that she had a true call to protect life. And what did she sacrifice to hear that call? Where might she have found the strength? What might you have done? I don't think that I would have been capable of offering sanctuary in that moment to that man. I'm pretty sure fear would have frozen me before I acted. My friends, to offer sanctuary is not easy. It is risky offering refuge and safety. And while some religious people might say our ultimate refuge, our ultimate salvation is up to God, our Unitarian and Universalist spiritual ancestors teach us that it is through us that the Spirit of life works on earth. So how do we do it? How can we be a congregation that creates a place of sanctuary, both within these walls and beyond? I suggest we begin by asking who we are offering sanctuary to. For example, who is welcome in this space? And what might we have to sacrifice to make more people welcome here? We say we are a welcoming congregation. We hope we have created a place that welcomes those who cannot find safety and refuge in other places. We hope to include people across a wide variety of racial, economic, educational, and social classes. We hope our circle is drawn wide. Is it? Are people experiencing poverty welcome here? Are there pay-to-play requirements for activities and programs? Do we assume everyone has the same educational background, physical ability, political persuasion, race, citizenship, preferred worship style? And what are we sacrificing to create a sanctuary, a place of safety and refuge? If the answer is nothing, what might we be missing? I'm asking a lot of questions in this sermon, and I realize that I'm not giving a lot of answers. Of course, that's not surprising for most Unitarian Universalists. Part of the strength and challenge of this tradition is that we value wrestling with the big questions far more than getting artificially simple answers from our pulpit. But our faith requires acting for justice and compassion, and action requires some discernment. I'd like to tell you one more story this morning that I think offers guidance for us about how we discern the best way to be a sanctuary within and beyond the walls of our church building. This story comes to us from Reverend Rebecca Parker and Reverend John Behrens. The people of Les Chambon, a small village in France, harbored hundreds of Jewish children during World War II. Years later, they were visited by one of the children who was now a grown man. He had been sheltered there, and he found himself asking why that village had sheltered Jewish children when so many others had not. He found his answer in observing their simple worship practices. Les Chambon was a Protestant village, a religious minority accustomed to struggling to survive. They regularly gathered together to sing hymns, to recall the faith of ancestors who held fast to the spirit of love, even in times of trial, to offer thanksgiving and pray for one another. When he asked them to explain, they said they could not imagine responding in any other way. It was simply the shape that their souls had. Their ways of worship and being together had formed them for courage and resistance. Their ways of worship had formed them for courage and resistance. This is why our welcome, our place of safety and refuge, needs to include our spiritual ancestors. Just like in the story of the flaming chalice and so many others, our ancestors have practiced using their faith in acts of courage and resistance. In this time when so many of us are in pain from the news of the day, our fears for ourselves or our families, in pain because of our compassion for one another, we need to remember others who have been here before. We need to gather together. We need to sing. We need to be thankful. We need to learn about what it means to be Unitarian Universalist people of faith. To form patterns of courage and resistance. And we need to remember those who will follow us, our descendants in this faith, in this country, in this world. It is for them that we continue to take bold risks, to give up fresh eggs in order to create places and to be people of safety and refuge. My beloved spiritual companions, may we be formed by our tradition and our time together as a community of welcome. May we be a people listening to one another, listening to our past and to our future, listening to the spirit of life, a people taking risks to provide comfort, to provide refuge, to provide safety, to provide sanctuary. May it be so. Amen.